This is Stefan Schmidt for InsiderIowa.com. We're at the Iowa State University bookstore. Thanks to them for letting us use their facility. Today I want to talk about the top story in the news, which is the terrible tragedy that occurred in Arizona, the shooting of Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords. But I don't want to talk about the actual event, the details. I want to talk a little bit about the ripple effects. This is a stone that's been thrown into the national pond and it's rippling out, and there are all kinds of discussions. I wanted to just make a couple of comments about those. One of the big discussions is whether this was just a lone and mentally disturbed individual who committed an act that has no larger significance. And I want to address that. Even if it is a lone individual who committed the act, the significance is that a friend of mine sent me an email this morning. He was an Iowa prosecutor, and he said when he was practicing law and working as a prosecutor, someone with a mental record like this would probably have been institutionalized, given psychiatric care, and possibly given medications, but taken off the streets until it was felt that he had overcome or could control his particular disability. He also said that he was very upset when in the 1970s and later in the United States we decided not to institutionalize people, but instead to basically release them, perhaps give them medication, but do very little scrutiny of them and let them back out on the streets. He said that he felt that had greatly damaged the security of communities and had reduced our ability to deal with people who may potentially be very dangerous. And so in that respect, we have a discussion about what we should do with people who are so odd, so strange, act in ways that are perceived as so threatening by fellow students and teachers, as was the case with the guy who shot her. Should we just say, well, we can't do anything until they actually commit an act of violence, which is what apparently the community college where he was enrolled said? Or do we have a kind of ethical and moral obligation to the common good to have institutional intervention, to have some way of saying, how can we help this person? How can we prevent this person from hurting others? However, and the Des Moines Register had an op-ed piece that said this story has no larger political implications. This had nothing to do with politics. This was just a mentally disturbed person. So I want to address that. I don't believe that's true. I think that there has been significant concern about the level of rhetoric, not just the normal political rhetoric of disagreeing about issues and disagreeing about candidates even, and attacking them for being perhaps weak and inexperienced and so on, but the actual insertion of real threats of violence into political commercials and into the last election, especially into the way campaigns were conducted. We know that Sarah Palin's blog or website had a map of the United States with Democrats that, as she put it, should be targeted by the Tea Party and by Republicans to defeat them. And unfortunately, targeted literally meant that they put what we all recognize, a circle with crosshairs, which is essentially a symbol for shooting into a target. She has not responded except to say she was sorry that this happened. One of her folks apparently said, oh, no, those were not at all targets. Those were symbols that you put on a map to designate a location, which is pure baloney. Those are targets. The word target was used and in several other of these races that became extremely, let's just call them aggressive. People actually said that if we can't get it done with ballots, then we need to use bullets. And I think that in the United States, we are now going to have to have a discussion about whether the First Amendment actually extends that far, that in fact verbal threats and the allusion to violence is in fact covered by the First Amendment, or whether it poses the kind of risk where individuals who may be unstable will take that as justification and as a cue to actually act out violently. You have to remember that this fellow that shot the Congresswoman also seemed to be absolutely opposed to government, hated government, and we know that there has been a lot of rhetoric about how government is bad and how we need smaller government and government is the enemy. And I think, as you have already seen, and I think we'll see that in the coming weeks, there is now a real self-examination going on in this country about where we want to draw the line, where we want to say that it does not serve the purposes of American democracy to go beyond a certain level of rhetoric. In particular, some of the talk show hosts who are extremely aggressive. There's a woman in Florida who was associated with a congressman who just got elected from there, who actually carries a gun onto her radio show and calls herself, a chick with a gun or something like that. And there were obviously also campaign commercials in which people used firearms to show that they were going to basically kill the budget deficit and so on. It's a good discussion. We need to talk about it. I think it's going to be very difficult to legislate rhetoric, and especially political rhetoric, because we do have freedom of speech. But I think it's a wonderful opportunity to talk about such things as gun control. I mean, should someone who is as mentally disturbed as this person be able to walk into a gun shop and buy a Glock 9mm? I personally don't think so. I think that we are exposing ourselves to real risks as a society, not only from individuals who may be mentally disturbed, but also, frankly, from terrorists and others who could freely buy guns and use them against this country. So I have no answers, but I do have a lot of confidence that we will have a really interesting, thorough discussion, and hopefully at the other end of it, we will come out with some sensible solutions to these problems. This is Stefan Schmidt for InsiderIowa.com.